You've spent most of your life gripping the wheel of a car that was never meant to be steered, trying to navigate roads you were never meant to control, obsessed with where you're going, and terrified of what might happen if you let go, as if your entire purpose was to keep everything from falling apart, even if it meant slowly unraveling in the process without anyone noticing. And maybe that's what no one ever told you, that control feels safe, but it's exhausting. It lures you in with the illusion of certainty, convinces you that if you can just plan far enough ahead, if you can just stay 2 steps in front of every possible outcome, then maybe, just maybe, you won't get hurt, you won't be surprised, you won't lose what you love. But underneath all of it, there's a quiet desperation, a fear that if you don't hold on tight enough, everything will slip away, or worse, that you'll finally see just how little control you had all along. You try to plan every step, anticipate every outcome, fix what hasn't even broken yet. And while your body may be here, going through the motions, showing up to work, smiling when expected, your mind is constantly somewhere else, running simulations, predicting pain, rehearsing failure, and preparing for futures that haven't happened. You're surviving imagined storms while standing in clear skies. You're building emergency shelters in places where the sun is still shining, and then wondering why you're too tired to enjoy any of it. And it's not your fault. This is what you were taught. That peace is earned through preparation, that safety comes from control, that letting go means giving up, that rest is irresponsible, that relaxing means you're unprepared, so you overfunction, you overthink, and you tell yourself you're being responsible, but really you're just scared. Scared of what might happen if you loosen your grip, scared of what you might feel if you stop moving, scared of who you might become if you stop performing. But what if that's the lie? What if your grip has been the very thing keeping you from the life that's trying to unfold? What if your obsession with managing every detail has only distanced you from the intelligence that was guiding you long before you ever learned how to worry? What if the very thing you've been calling security is the prison you built out of fear? Because there's a difference between being intentional and being afraid. And when fear drives your decisions, no amount of planning will bring you peace. There is no version of control that can guarantee certainty. There is no future perfect enough to make up for a present moment you've abandoned. And there is no amount of achievement that can compensate for a life lived in constant tension. You don't need more control. You need more trust. Not blind faith in some abstract outcome. Not magical thinking that removes all risk, but a quiet, grounded trust in the moment that's already here. The moment that's holding you, guiding you, shaping you in ways your mind may not understand, but your soul already recognizes. A kind of trust that doesn't require guarantees, only presence. A kind of trust that invites you to soften your grip, to breathe a little deeper, to feel instead of fix. Letting go isn't failure. It's clarity. It's remembering that you were never meant to force your life into shape. You were meant to allow it to shape you. And maybe, just maybe, the purpose you've been searching for doesn't arrive when you figure everything out, but when you finally allow yourself to stop gripping so tightly and begin to listen. Listen to the parts of yourself you've silenced. Listen to the wisdom hiding underneath your fear. Listen to the stillness that's been waiting for you to stop performing long enough to notice. Because you were not born anxious. You were taught to be. You were not born rigid. You became that way out of necessity. Somewhere along the way, you learned that control could keep you safe, but it also kept you small. And now, you have the opportunity to return, to come home, to remember that the wheel you've been clinging to was never yours to steer, that life is not a machine to be operated, it's a current to be trusted. So, the real question is, what would it feel like to loosen your grip just a little? What would it mean to stop preparing for disaster and start preparing for peace? What would your life look like if you stopped bracing and started receiving? Maybe you don't need to know where you're going. Maybe you just need to let life show you how to get there. And maybe, in that soft surrender, you'll finally begin to feel what freedom really is. It never arrives the way you think it will. There's no dramatic unraveling, no final moment of clarity where everything falls into place and all your questions are answered at once. Instead, It begins slowly, almost imperceptibly, like the fading of a background noise you didn't know was there until it disappears and leaves you in unfamiliar quiet. You don't let go because it's easy. You let go because the weight of control begins to cost more than the comfort it once brought. Because what once felt like discipline now feels like depletion. And what once kept you safe now only keeps you distant from yourself. And even though your outer world may look the same, your habits, your routines, your conversations, something within begins to shift in ways that can't be measured or explained. Not in loud declarations or life-altering events, but in the smallest cracks between thoughts, in the subtle decision not to react immediately, in the moment you notice your own breath before rushing to fix what doesn't need fixing. For the first time in a long time, you don't reach for another strategy. You don't open another book, ask another person, rehearse another excuse. You simply sit, and in that rare, quiet sitting, something becomes unmistakably clear. That much of your suffering was never about what happened. It was about your refusal to let it happen without a fight. It was about your insistence on holding back the river, building dams where life only asked you to float. Not because you were broken, but because you were trained to believe that presence is dangerous, that stillness is laziness, that only those who fight for control are truly prepared for life's storms. But when you look back honestly, you begin to see the pattern. How many of your hardest days were made harder by the tension you carried, trying to control what was never yours to control. That's when the shift begins. Not because you've figured it all out, but because you've stopped believing that you need to. You stop assuming every emotion must be explained, every doubt must be dissected, every discomfort must be eliminated. You begin to notice the voice in your head that constantly warns you about what's next, and you begin to question it. You start to remember how often it's been wrong, how many times it's promised disaster and delivered nothing but wasted energy. And slowly, without fanfare or applause, you begin to withdraw your loyalty from fear. You stop giving it the final say. You stop letting it masquerade as caution or responsibility or maturity. And without needing to announce it to anyone, you begin to live differently. You move more slowly. You listen more closely. You stop bracing against life and start opening to it. You begin to sense the difference between preparing and panicking, between thinking and spiraling, between showing up and trying to control how you're seen. Letting go isn't a rejection of intelligence. It's the realization that real intelligence includes trust. It's the quiet decision to no longer let fear pretend it's keeping you safe, when all it's really doing is keeping you small. You realize that surrender isn't about becoming passive. It's about becoming receptive. It's the courage to let things be unfinished, to leave a question unanswered, to hold space for discomfort without trying to eliminate it, because maybe the discomfort isn't a problem. Maybe it's a teacher, and maybe letting go doesn't mean losing yourself, but finally meeting yourself beneath all the layers of effort. This is the beginning, not of giving up, but of waking up to a life that has always been here, waiting for you to stop wrestling it into form so it can finally move through you with ease. You stop fighting the current, you start learning to float. And somehow, in ways you never predicted, life stops feeling like something you must survive and starts becoming something you're allowed to feel, to trust, to live. And in that subtle, sacred shift, you don't just let go of control, you reclaim your presence. And that presence becomes your new anchor, your new intelligence, your new freedom. There is a kind of clarity that doesn't come from figuring things out, but from no longer needing to. A kind of knowing that doesn't arrive through answers, but through attention, through being present enough to realize that life continues to unfold gracefully, purposefully, even when you've stopped desperately trying to direct every moment. This realization arrives quietly, gently, almost imperceptibly, as if emerging from a hidden place deep within you that's always been there but was long obscured by your relentless quest for certainty and control. At first, this type of trust feels unfamiliar, not because it's new, but precisely because it's something you left behind years ago when certainty felt safer, control seemed necessary, and logic promised protection, even as these very things quietly made your world feel smaller, more confined, less alive. But beneath your carefully constructed reality, beneath the fears that urged you to control every outcome, the trust you were born with never truly disappeared. It merely became buried beneath layers of expectation, beneath the heavy burden of who you thought you had to become, what you thought you had to achieve, and what had to logically align before you granted yourself permission to breathe freely. Yet now, as you slowly loosen your grip on the illusion of control, you start to notice something remarkable. Not a clear voice or neatly packaged answers, but a subtle rhythm, a gentle intelligence operating quietly beneath the surface of your days. This intelligence speaks softly, subtly, not in words, but in moments, in the perfect timing of people appearing exactly when you need them most, in coincidences that feel too meaningful to dismiss, and in sudden surges of peace that arrive without logic or explanation. These moments occur not because the external circumstances of your life have dramatically changed, but because something deep within you has shifted, something that finally allowed you to move out of your own way. And perhaps that's what surrender was always pointing toward, not as resignation or defeat, but as the quiet, deliberate choice to finally set down the exhausting burden of absolute certainty, to let go of the belief that your worth is intricately tied to your capacity to flawlessly control outcomes and manage every detail of your life, and to gently, yet resolutely, recognize that life never demanded perfection from you. It only ever invited your openness, your willingness to remain fully present, even when nothing was clear, even when the only certainty was the very next breath you took and the courage to experience it deeply. Because trust is not something you patiently wait to receive. It's something you consciously return to. It exists in those rare and precious moments when you cease your internal argument with reality, when you stop insisting that life conform to your expectations, and instead embrace it exactly as it unfolds. Trust appears quietly, subtly, in the spaces between your thoughts, in those brief intervals where you no longer feel compelled to predict, control, or even explain what comes next. When you begin living more consistently from that space, not always perfectly, yet often enough to truly notice the profound difference, you stop perceiving your purpose as something external, something you must endlessly chase or diligently uncover. Instead, you begin to see purpose as something deeply inherent to how you live each moment, how you meet each day, how you relate to the unfolding circumstances around you. Purpose, you discover, is less about the destinations you reach or the achievements you gather, and more about your consistent capacity to live authentically, compassionately, and fully present to whatever life brings. Thus, the essential question shifts profoundly, from anxiously wondering where your life is ultimately headed to, quietly considering whether you are genuinely willing to receive the life already reaching out to you. This life isn't the idealized version you've meticulously planned, or the flawless future you've tirelessly envisioned. It's the imperfect yet profoundly beautiful reality unfolding right before you, rich with uncertainty, laced with silence, filled with complexity and unexpected moments of grace. And perhaps, as you gently explore this shift, you begin to understand that true purpose doesn't resemble the external markers of success you were once conditioned to pursue. It's neither a grand mission to fulfill nor a prestigious title to acquire, nor is it a definitive finish line you cross triumphantly at the end of a long, demanding race. Instead, purpose feels much more like a gentle, quiet homecoming, an effortless return to a life that has always been available, always patiently waiting, just beneath your frantic striving and relentless efforts to mold reality into something manageable and predictable. It's a homecoming marked by profound simplicity, by the quiet realization that you don't have to force life into alignment with your expectations, nor struggle against it to extract meaning and clarity. You simply need to allow yourself to meet life openly, gently, with curiosity and humility, recognizing that each moment is inherently valuable, not because it meets your standards of perfection or aligns exactly with your plans, but because it is uniquely and authentically yours, perfectly imperfect in its unfolding. This return to presence, this embracing of uncertainty, this quiet yet powerful shift in perception, isn't merely a choice you make once. It becomes the essence of how you live your life from this moment forward. And as you embody this truth, something remarkable begins to happen. Life finally feels coherent, natural, and purposeful, not because you've deciphered every mystery or solved every challenge, but precisely because you've stopped insisting you must. In letting go, you realize that purpose was never something external you had to grasp, but an internal state you simply had to remember. And in remembering, you discover the most profound and liberating truth of all. The life you've been seeking has been patiently waiting for you all along, quietly inviting you home to yourself, welcoming you into a reality that's finally